Hey boys, it's HarmNone. Today we're going to be going over my picks for the top 10 best OG supercars in Grand Theft Auto Online. Now for a car to be considered OG, I'm going to say it had to come out before 2016, maybe 2015. A lot of these are going to be actual OG cars that released with the game, and some of them are going to be from DLCs that came out very shortly after GTA 5 came out. With that being said, if you enjoyed the video, a like is of course appreciated. If not, dislike. Subscribe to my channel if you guys are new. And let's go ahead and get started with number 10. At number 10, we have the Pegasi Vodka coming in at $240,000. And the week that this video is actually going out, the Vodka is available for purchase within the LS car meet. So if you're interested in picking it up, it is available in there for 240 grand. Not too bad of a price. Unfortunately, the Vodka has always been one of the slower supercars in Grand Theft Auto Online. Even when the game first came out and there was only a handful of supercars, the Vodka was truly one of the very worst. It's not that great of a vehicle, however it does have a little bit of customization and it is kind of nice to drive. Its biggest problem though is that it's rear wheel drive only, meaning that it gets a super poor launch and the acceleration is not that great. However, once you're moving, it's not terrible, and the handling is also not too bad. I think that the Vodka could have maybe looked a little bit better, but generally I think it's still a pretty decent supercar, especially given the price of only $240,000. Definitely look into the Vodka if you guys are interested. Let's move on to number 9. Next up, number 9, we have the Bravado Banshee 900R, coming in at $105,000 for the Banshee, and then an additional $565,000 for the initial Benny's upgrade, and then you can spend several more $1,000s on it, making it look exactly how you want to. Now the 900R turned the Banshee from being a sports car into a supercar, which is pretty interesting, and for a long time this was actually one of the fastest supercars in the entire game in terms of top speed, and still to this day it has a top speed of about 131 miles per hour I believe, which is pretty darn quick considering just how old this car is. Being that it's a Benny's upgradable vehicle as well, it has a ton of customization options that you can do to it, albeit comparatively to newer vehicles in GTA Online, it actually doesn't seem like that much nowadays, but still it is a very customizable car, it's very good looking, and I think you can do some really cool stuff with the 900R. The performance is pretty good, it does struggle off the line due to it being rear wheel drive only, again, similar to the Vodka, but once you're moving, it's not too bad. The handling is a little bit worse than the Vodka though, I would say, so do just be aware of that, but still a great car. Next up, number 8, we have the Pegasi Infernus coming in at $440,000. Unfortunately, this thing is removed similar to the Vodka, so you can't buy it at the best of times. However, when it becomes available in the game again, it is definitely something that you should look into picking up. Now, unfortunately, the Infernus does not have much in the way of customization. I believe it has like 3 spoiler options, and that's pretty much it, which is very sad. I wish that they went the extra mile with the Infernus when it first came out and just gave it a little bit more customization, but hopefully at some point in the future they will add some customization options to the vehicle. I think that that would be really, really cool. The Infernus is all-wheel drive, but it has a very, very bad split. When it comes to the all-wheel drive, it's like 90% rear, 10% front, which is enough to make it like good and it still launches pretty well, but it's not really that great. You kind of would want at least 80-20, something like that. But the Infernus is still a pretty good car. It actually handles relatively well, it accelerates well off the line, and it has a somewhat decent top speed as well. It's kind of mid that it doesn't have any customization, but it just sort of is what it is with a car that's this old. At number 7, we have the first car that was ever added into Grand Theft Auto Online, I believe, with the Grotti Turismo R coming in at $500,000. The Turismo R is a phenomenal car in GTA Online, and it actually got some added customization to it with the release of the Criminal Enterprises DLC back in the summer of 2022. So this thing actually has a ton of customization now, way more than it did when it first came out in GTA Online all the way back in 2013 or maybe early 2014. This thing's also one of the best performing OG cars in the game. I remember the day that this thing came out, everybody had one and everybody was using it and everybody was beating guys with entities and with adders, and everyone who had an adder or an entity was pretty pissed because a $500,000 car was beating their $875,000 car or their $1 million car. So that was kind of a curveball that Rockstar threw at us, but it is a really, really cool car, and with the added customization now, it just makes it that much better. The value for the money with this one is pretty crazy. I think it's a great car. It looks awesome. Tons of customization now, of course, and really good performance to back it all up. Definitely pick up a Turismo R if you can, it is a great vehicle. Next up at number 6 we have the Pfister 811, which was added relatively recently into Grand Theft Auto 5's release. It goes for $1,135,000, and for that price you get a very, very fast car in terms of top speed especially. The Pfister 811 tops out at about 133 miles per hour, which is absolutely crazy. Even by today's standards in GTA Online, I would say this thing is still within the top 20 fastest top speed vehicles in the entire game, which is pretty nuts to think about because this thing came out in like 2015, which is just insane. Now the 811 unfortunately doesn't have a lot of customization, being that it is a older vehicle and things like that, and I don't think that it's necessarily the greatest looking vehicle from the front end. I do think that the back spoiler section is really interesting looking, and I've always kind of been a fan of it, but I know some of my friends like Twingo for example don't really like how the 811 is kind of sorted out. It was meant to be a Porsche 918 Spider, and it kind of like missed the mark a little bit, to be honest. Even by my standards, even though I like the vehicle, it could have been a little bit more like the 918, and I would have probably liked it just a little bit more. Still, it is a great car, and with that high top speed, it's awesome. The only thing that this thing really struggles with is cornering, and that is only on like big stunt racing tracks and stuff like that. So for the vast majority of the time in free mode and everything like that, the 811 is going to be a great car for you no matter what. Next up at number 5 we have a personal favorite of mine. This is the Grotti Cheetah, coming in at $650,000. And if you're newer to GTA Online, you probably have never seen this car ever in your life. And hell, even if you were an OG player, barely anyone ever drove the Cheetah because everyone was so focused on the Entity, as well as the Adder and the Grotti Turismo R. This thing just kind of got overshadowed in almost every way, and I can kind of see why. It's not the greatest looking car, especially from the front. However, similar to the 811, I think from the rear, this thing actually looks really, really good. And I think some of the spoiler options that Rockstar made available for it kind of help to make it a little bit better looking from the rear. Now, unfortunately, the performance of this thing was just not up to par with the Entity XF or the Adder or the Grotti Turismo R. In fact, it was more similar to the Vodka than anything really. But still, it is a really fun car to drive. It has a really good engine sound. The handling is awesome. The acceleration for being rear wheel drive only is actually not too bad. And the top speed is somewhat decent. You're not going to win any races with it, but it is still a pretty cool car, and I think you can make it look really, really good depending on what build you go for. I would definitely recommend picking this thing up though, guys. It is an awesome vehicle. Next up at number 4 we have the Pegassi Osiris, which is also available in GTA Online this week. Now it regularly goes for $1,950,000. However, the week that this is coming out, it's actually discounted and it's going for just under $1.2 million, making it a lot more valuable. However, if you're watching this in the future, it will just be at that regular $1,950,000 price tag. Before that price, even, it is a pretty good car. The Osiris is based off the Pagani Huayra in real life, and it's one of the only Pagani style vehicles that we have in GTA Online, which I think makes it just that much more valuable. It doesn't have a ton in the way of customization, but it does have some good little front bumper options, a rear bumper option, and it does have some side skirts as well as spoilers, and it's got some more vents and stuff you can put on it as well. For $1.95 million, I think that this car is kind of up in the air as to whether it's like a good purchase or not. You'll have to make that decision for yourselves, but the Osiris is pretty cool. It is all-wheel drive, it gets great acceleration, great launch off the line. It's also got a pretty competitive top speed, and it can actually hold a candle to cars like the Ignis, for example, and things like that. So despite it being a very old car, it can actually do pretty well against a lot of modern cars in GTA as well. So it is pretty cool that it can actually hold up. Next up, number 3, we have my favorite car in GTA Online, and it is of course the Truffade Adder, coming in at $1 million even. There's not a hell of a lot to say about the Adder because I know a lot of people don't like this car, and I can kind of see why. It's really not that awesome, to be honest. It's all-wheel drive, which is one of the best things it has going for it, and the acceleration and the launch are really good, as well as the top speed being about 126 miles per hour, which is not that awful, even to this day. But the Adder has absolutely zero customization options. No spoiler, no bumpers, no skirts, no rear bumpers, no roof options, like literally nothing. You buy the car for $1 million and it's just, that's it. Nothing else. So the Adder is definitely one that's kind of an acquired taste, and I think that I have the acquired taste, but I don't think a lot of people do because there's not really a good reason for it, to be honest. I'm coping really hard about the Adder, that's for sure. But it is still my favorite car. I still think it's a great one. I think it sounds awesome. I think it looks pretty good. despite not being able to do anything to it. And at number 2, we have the Overflawed Entity XF coming in at $875,000. I remember the Entity XF back in the day used to destroy the adder, and it was always cheaper than the adder, and so a lot of people would be like, man, the Entity XF is the best car in the game, and honestly at the time it was. This thing actually shreds. It's also all-wheel drive, which a lot of people don't really seem to realize about it, but it's got a weird split similar to the Pegasi Infernus, where it's like 90% of the power goes to the rear wheels and 10% goes to the front, but it still does launch really, really well. It also has a little bit of customization, which is pretty cool too. It handles nicely, and overall I think it's a very good looking vehicle generally. Of course, it is based off of the Koenigsegg CCR, or you could say it's the CCX. It depends what you are sort of into, but it's not quite the Agera. I don't think. I think it's a little bit too old looking to be the Agera, but you could argue maybe it is. It's a really good car though. This thing absolutely shredded on the racetrack back in the day, and still to this day I think it's a good looking car. I don't think it has aged very poorly. I think it actually looks quite modern. Like if they added it into the game with maybe a little bit more customization in the next update, I think people would be like, yeah, no, totally fits. So pretty cool car, all things considered. Now for a couple of honorable mentions, we have the Vapid Bullet coming in at $155,000, regarded as the worst supercar in Grand Theft Auto Online. The performance on this thing is just not very good, and it's very similar to the Adder in the way that it has absolutely nothing you can do to it. So it's a little bit underwhelming. A spoiler option would have gone a really long way on the Vapid Bullet, but unfortunately it never got it. So the Vapid Bullet, still a pretty cool car. It is one of those ones you can see on the streets being driven around by NPCs. Of course, you can't keep it in Grand Theft Auto Online, but it is still a pretty cool vehicle, and I actually kind of like the way it performs, but it's just not going to be the fastest, that's for sure. And for our final honorable mention, we have the Progen T20 coming in at $2,200,000. I remember when the Progen T20 released into Grand Theft Auto Online, I was so obsessed with the McLaren P1, and the T20 was the closest thing we had to the P1, and it still is to this day. It is actually very similar, to be completely honest. I remember selling my Entity XF, I remember selling my Cheetah, I remember selling a bunch of different cars just to be able to afford the Progen T20, because at the time $2,200,000 was so much money in GTA. I ended up just breaking the bank and selling everything just to be able to have this one car. It is still a pretty cool car to this day. It is all-wheel drive, gets a really good launch off the line, great acceleration, high top speed, and like close to 129 I want to say it is. This thing is really, really insane. Honestly, a great car. Definitely one that I would recommend picking up. The customization options that it has, there's, a small amount of stuff you can do, but it's kind of enough to satisfy, for most people at least. Overall, great car. Definitely pick up a T20. This thing is awesome. And of course, at number 1, the best OG supercar in Grand Theft Auto Online is the Pegasi Zentorno from the High Life update for $725,000. Now, we all thought that when the Gran Turismo R got added to the game, that it was up for the supercars category, that thing was going to be the best supercar that was ever going to be added to GTA. Boy, were we wrong, because a few short months later, the Pegasi Zentorno got released for only $725,000, and I remember this thing accelerated harder than any other vehicle in the game at the time, while also having a decent amount of customization when it first came out. But now, fast forward to today, this thing is still one of the best bang for your buck supercars in the entire game, and they actually added customization to it when they did for the Gran Turismo R. So this thing's got a ton of customization options as well, which is really, really cool. Now, it's all-wheel drive, so it gets a great launch, great acceleration. It's got a pretty high top speed, I believe around 127 miles per hour, and the handling on this thing is absolutely fantastic. The Zentorno is definitely the best OG supercar in Grand Theft Auto Online, that is for sure. Definitely pick up a Zentorno. Still to this day, it is an awesome car. You really cannot go wrong with owning one. So there you have it, guys. That's been my list for the top 10 best OG supercars in Grand Theft Auto Online. Let me know what you thought of my list in the comment section down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, dislike if you didn't, of course. Subscribe to my channel if you guys are new, and I will see you all in the next video. Until then, take care. Peace.